So I think that personal experience did shape, I think, my views, and I would say even mine and Apurva's views, our family's views on abortion. I've been pro-life for a long time. Logic leads me to many of my positions. If brainwaves end, and that's when life ends, I think you can't say that life begins any later than when brainwaves begin. That's 5 or 6 weeks after conception. But here's my view on the abortion issue. I think that the pro-life movement, and I consider myself part of that, hasn't done enough to walk the walk in actually standing for life and pro-life principles. I want to talk about more expansive policies of ease of access to adoption, to child care. And I, for one, I think I'm alone in the GOP on this, but I hope more embrace it. As a man, I will say this. We need to codify sexual responsibility into the law to say that if a woman brings a child to term, she should, at her option, be able to make the man the principal caretaker financially responsible for raising that child if it's confirmed by a genetic paternity test. I think that's how we're able to unite the country at least as best we can on this issue, to say it's not about men's rights or women's rights, it's about human rights. In the case of a pregnant woman who was assaulted when the unborn child died, I haven't met one person, left or right, who says that that criminal doesn't deserve liability for that death. So that says we share these pro-life instincts in common, and I want us to do better as Republicans to actually stand for those life principles than we have done to date.
So in the case of Kate Cox, where that pregnancy was not viable and she had to go through the courts, is it a compassionate message for the GOP to say that she shouldn't? Would you have allowed her to have that abortion?
Well, I think, Bran, with due respect, I think that you are overlaying a lot of assumptions to say that's not a viable pregnancy. I don't think that that's a correct characterization. The facts are still coming out, and I'm not firsthand in the room with her and her doctor. But I don't think that it is an accepted fact at all that that was not a child who was going to be born. That child absolutely could have been alive if that pregnancy was taken to term. And so I think that a lot of the overlay in the narrative around this has confounded the reality.
Her doctors testified
but
that
what
it
I
was not a
stand
viable
by,
pregnancy.
Not a viable pregnancy is viable until what age? After birth. I think these are separate debates and nuances that we deserve to have, rather than just telling the public that that baby would have never made it to term, which, on my understanding of the facts, is actually false. And so we need to get to actual detail rather than just using vague terms like viable when that refers to viable even after birth. What I think we need is sensible policies in this country that implement pro-life views. And the pro-life views that I support are no federal funding for Planned Parenthood. Our taxpayers dollars shouldn't be going to fund Planned Parenthood. I think we need to stand for life in the form of access to adoption, access to child care. I think we can have a legitimate bipartisan discussion about that. And I favor a policy that says this should not be borne exclusively by women. It's wrong. I think men should share in this responsibility equally, or at least as equally as we can. I think the woman, if it's confirmed by a genetic paternity test, should legally be able to make the man the sole responsible party for raising that child, which will force men to take responsibility for their sexual decisions on the front end, not just putting this on women. And I think that's the way we need to not only frame, but actually approach this issue, to say this issue doesn't have to divide us to a breaking point. We're in this together, that we understand that unborn life is life, we respect it. I believe most people actually share those instincts in common if we don't make this a men versus women's issue. And I, for my part, not just as a Republican, but as a man, am willing to go to the fullest extent possible to stand for those pro-life principles. More access to crisis pregnancy care and otherwise that doesn't exist in the country. Let's have that conversation.